This is the only French sports car from the 1990s. It's called the Venturi Atlantic. It looks like a Ferrari 355 and a C4 Corvette had a baby. However, it's pretty cool. This had a turbocharged V6 making between 210 and 260 horsepower. It was designed by two coach builders who also designed the Renault 5 Turbo. Sounds good too. It has a Garrett turbocharger, proper race car technology, and considering these guys were pretty ambitious, they even tried to enter it into the Dakar. But unfortunately, this car here is just a prototype. That's not to say, however, that they didn't design multiple cool versions. Here is one of them, the 260 LM, a proper race car for the road. This car was already light, but they somehow managed to make it even lighter. It weighs barely over a ton. In fact, it's turbocharged. It's got the turbocharged V6, the higher output one, with 260 horsepower. It also has bucket seats and beefed up suspension. Unfortunately, however, this was the only video I could find, and it's from 2013. The guy must have had a terrible camera, and unfortunately not many were made. I actually don't know how many. However, my favourite version is this, the 400 GT. 408 horsepower from a 3-litre twin-turbo V6 mounted in the middle. Basically, this car weighs the same, it still has the same suspension and everything. However, this thing was a proper weapon. This thing was faster than a Lamborghini Countach, a Ferrari 355, and a 993 Turbo. This thing was ridiculously fast. However, nobody remembers it. If you were to say Venturi 400 GT, no one would know what you're talking about. However, after this astounding success, you'd think that Venturi would go on to be an absolute world-beating sports car company. However, there were a few minor problems. Number one, these two guys, despite working for a pretty high-end coach building company, didn't really have that much money. So these cars were all handmade. They didn't have a proper production factory. So only 700 are said to exist. In fact, that's probably fewer. No one really knows how much these cost new. However, it's likely that considering they were handmade, they cost more than the Ferrari, even though they were faster and, well, who knows, maybe better on track. There's not much information on this car, that's all I have to say. So basically, this car never really caught on. Sure, there were some cool versions of it, including this, the 300 bi-turbo designed to beat the Lotus Esprit V8, which seems like a bit of a downfall. However, it was still fast, well built, and much more comfortable than the Lotus. However, sadly, just 78 models of this car exist. And Venturi sadly stopped making cars in 2000. However, they did have one more trick. In 2004, Venturi built this, the world's first production electric sports car, the Venturi Fetish. Just 25 were made. It first produced 245 horsepower. However, towards the end of its life, it was fitted with a 300 horsepower electric motor that produced an astounding 4-second 0 to 60 time, which back then was pretty respectable. It cost nearly 300,000 euros and unfortunately was only sold in the Japanese market. So if you find one, you could import it, but chances are it's probably going to be out of your price range. Much like most of the cars that Venturi made, they're very rare. Not many of them exist today. Most have rusted away, and well, sadly, Venturi doesn't really show many signs of ever making a
return.